Hello, I had comments on one of my previous videos about my obscene amount of vintage scissors. They're all stuck in my Arabia jug. I've got a whole collection of Arabia jugs, and some of them are German, and some of them are English, and some of them are Italian, and I have a policy of no scissor left behind. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today is a playing video. I recently received these little printouts as a gift as part of an order, and they are just on plain paper, printing so-so. The images are okay, but they seem kind of flimsy. So I thought of various ways to let them look slightly more authentic for use in journals. I'm going to start with this one. It's a copy of a correspondence card written, obviously the original would have been in fountain and in ink. Apart from stiffening them with cardstock, which I'm not going to be dealing with, these are quick fixes just to give them somewhat more depth and texture. So as a first fix, I'm going to add a vintage stamp in a color complementing the card, and then I'm going to do new postage stamps over the existing, and then these are vintage post office stamps, and I'm going to do some random numbers in a red, as it would be like an official stamp or something like that, just to make the thing look slightly more real. I may even smudge one of the stamps. So that now has an original stamp. It's been re-stamped. It's got a number that's smudged a bit. Next step is to use the flourishes and the fountain pen writing. I'm going to try and use a colored ink. So this is a turquoisey ink, and see whether I can just trace over some of them to let them look more alive. I'm using just a dip pen nib. I'm not an expert. My penmanship isn't great. Let's see how this goes. So that's what it looks like. I've merely traced over the name and the surname with the blue ink, and I've made some scratches and I've made some blotches, and I'm just going to let that dry for a bit. The next issue that I have with this postcard is that the original had a fold there, and there was a tear there, which now copied onto white. So the next step would be to distress that a bit. So I've cut out the bit of white, and I'm going to use this as like a kitchen grinding block, just to, I'm going to use that just to give it a bit of a sand. So that's now slightly torn and slightly roughened up and distressed. I'm going to go ahead and give it a fold where it had a fold, and do it both ways. It's starting to feel slightly less flat. Step is I'm going to round the corners. I don't like the very square corners. I pulled out another one of these, and I've been using that as my test. So I tested the blue ink. I tested a different corner. Didn't like that. So that will go into my junk journal. And then these are now looking like this. I know most of you are screaming, just distress ink it, but I wanted to do a bit more than that. I bought this rubber stamp. It's slightly perished. It seems to be someone's signature in Stockholm. I'm going to try that on the card just as an added layer, because it doesn't really stamp. Clearly you can't really read it, it's just another bit of authenticity, fake authenticity. I have the Distress ink handy, but I think I'm going to add a little sticker, and then this is a little date stamp. I'm just going to ink up some numbers, not the date, and just stamp it on there before I distress it finally. So those stamps are a bit wonky and a bit faded and a bit messy, and then lastly just something over that. Often cards travel through numerous locations, or they get lost or something like that, and there you go. Some new postal marks, smudged things, some ink, some random stickers to show that it maybe got rerouted, bit of a tear, and very, very slight distressing. So that looks much less flat than it originally did. The next one seems to be a part of a newspaper with a photo or journal or something like that. And again, very, very flat. So let's try and wax it. There's some quick waxing ideas where you crumple up a tea candle, spread it over and iron it between two wax papers. I like using a beeswax candle. You can see it's quite flat from rubbing all over, rubbing, ironing. You get a much better finish and much better control on how saturated your paper is. So I've waxed this paper, I haven't heated it up. While the iron is heating up, I'm going to try a bit of distress spray on here before I iron it to see how that improves the color or add some aged effects. It's the Vintage Photo Distress Spray, and I'm just going to spritz it like very, very lightly. So that's one little spritz. As you can see, it's actually pooling on top of the wax. So let's see how it goes when you heat up the wax. So that's now pretty much translucent. I'm going to go over once again. That's the back, that's the front. I'm happy with that. There's a tiny little spot there that the wax is now pooling on top, and then you know you're done. So you can see. And then give it a crumple. Where you've waxed, the white lines will be very, very apparent on the folds, and naturally the paper will also get a small tear. That's front, that's back, and then I think the idea would be that this was torn out of somewhere for keeping. So let's tear along the sides. So that's done. There's some light tearing. I've also given it a double fold, because if you were carrying something in your pocket, that's what you would do. And that looks much more tactile and less flat than what we started out with minimal input. This is the last little one that I'm going to give attention to. A little card with some text and an image. I think I'm going to pick out some details in gold and probably emboss all along the edge here. So I've embossed it twice, once with a clear ink and once with a brown ink. It's very messy embossing. It's purely to add some shine and some texture. Also, I'm going to give it a shake and sort of spray paint the card with some gold ink. So that's very quick. That's just shaking the pen. The pen's defective, and you add little bits of gold. They're slightly raised, as you can see, and they just add a bit of opulence to this little pear. That actually looks a bit naff. The scale's wrong. It looks a bit stupid, but got some music washi tape, which I think will look better. So just a tiny bit there. Looks a bit different and it's not as visible as the original. That's better. I smudged some of the gold by mistake, but I mean it's not really a big deal. So there's some texture, there's some depth, there's some shine. Let's see what else we can add. The lady's got quite a interesting dress, so I'm going to add the tiniest little lace ruffle along the train there. And then that's done. This is just meant to cheer up some dull papers. So her skirt's on. And then lastly, just going to wax it. Some gold wax. And just the edges really, to give it a bit of shine. So there we go, 3 simple ways to turn this into that, and this will work for printables, anything that's slightly flat, magazine images with a bit of shine, anything you want to alter really. Thanks for watching. I'd love to hear from you in comments. Happy making.